Have you ever wondered why you keep falling for the same type of person over and over again? Why no matter how much you grow, heal, or promise yourself never again, you still find yourself pulled toward a familiar energy, a familiar wound, a familiar ending? It's not weakness, it's not fate, it's a deeper pattern within your psyche that Carl Jung devoted his life to understanding. Because according to Jung, we don't just choose lovers, we repeat them, and that repetition is the unconscious mind trying to tell us something we have not yet dared to face. Comment: I'm ready to break the pattern if this feels like your truth. At first glance, it seems like bad luck. You meet someone who seems different until they're not. The mask slips, the story repeats, and you wonder how you didn't see it coming. But Jung would tell you, you didn't fall into the same situation by accident. You were led there by your own inner architecture, the blueprint of your early experiences, your unmet emotional needs, your forgotten wounds. The psyche does not forget, even if your conscious mind does. It recreates, replays, and reattracts the same emotional lesson until it is finally learned. This is what Jung called the repetition compulsion, the unconscious urge to relive our unresolved past through new people, hoping this time the story will end differently. But it rarely does. Because when we are unconscious of the pattern, we are ruled by it. We don't just fall in love with a person, we fall into a role: the victim, the rescuer, the abandoned, the invisible, and we unknowingly choose partners who fit the script, perfectly cast in the play of our unresolved psyche. The truth is, we don't fall in love with people at all. We fall in love with symbols, with what someone represents in our inner world, with how they echo a parent who never truly saw us, with how they mirror a part of us we've repressed, with how they awaken a dynamic we know so well. It feels like home, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts. Because pain is often the path the soul takes to awaken. And so we repeat, not because we are broken, but because we are trying to heal. The psyche draws us toward the familiar, not to punish us, but to free us, to give us one more chance to respond differently, to choose awareness over compulsion, to finally break the loop. But the loop cannot be broken until it is seen, and seeing requires courage. The courage to stop blaming them and start listening to the pattern inside us. This is where the real work begins. Not in trying to avoid certain people, but in asking, why do they feel so familiar? What part of my past does this person echo? What role am I slipping into without realizing it? Because until you answer those questions, the faces may change, but the story will stay the same. Most of us don't realize we're walking around with a script, a deeply ingrained emotional storyline, written long before we knew how to speak it aloud. Carl Jung believed these scripts were not simply personal, they were archetypal, formed by childhood experience, shaped by culture, and embedded in the collective unconscious. And without knowing it, we step into relationships, not as ourselves, but as characters in a play we never meant to audition for. A play called unfinished business. When you fall for someone who later breaks your heart, the temptation is to call it misjudgment. But in Jungian psychology, it's something much deeper, a symbolic encounter. You weren't drawn to their kindness or their cruelty, their charm or their coldness. You were drawn to the feeling they stirred in you. And that feeling often matches the one you've known your entire life. That's why the connection feels so intense, so unforgettable, because it isn't new, it's ancient, a repetition of something your soul is still trying to resolve. Think about the roles you've played in love. Were you the fixer, the chaser, the one always giving more, or the one afraid to get close? These aren't just behaviors, they're identities forged in your early emotional landscape. Maybe you learned that love must be earned, that safety feels boring, that being wanted means performing. And so you keep finding people who help you relive those truths, even when they no longer serve you. It's not your fault, it's your pattern. Jung warned that what remains unconscious will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. That's why awareness is everything. If you don't know the role you're playing, you'll keep choosing actors who help you play it out. You'll think the world is doing something to you, when in fact your psyche is trying to do something through you. Every repeated heartbreak is the unconscious shouting, "Look here, there's something you still haven't healed." The tragedy is not in repeating the pattern. The tragedy is never realizing it's a pattern at all. When you awaken to your role, everything changes. You start to feel the difference between a connection and a compulsion. You begin to question the attraction, the intensity, the story, and with that questioning comes power, the power to choose, not from fear, not from fantasy, but from presence. Breaking the cycle doesn't mean becoming perfect. It means becoming conscious. You stop waiting for someone else to behave differently and begin taking ownership of what you're still replaying. That's where true freedom begins, not outside of you, but within the silent space where you choose not to be who you used to be. If you've ever felt drawn to someone and couldn't explain why, if the connection felt magnetic, overwhelming, even irrational, there's a reason. According to Carl Jung, that pull often comes not from the heart, but from the shadow. The shadow is the part of ourselves we've disowned, denied, or buried. It holds the traits we're ashamed of, afraid of, or were told we shouldn't express. But it also holds our vitality, our power, and our unlived potential. And when the shadow stirs, it doesn't whisper, it grabs us. The people we are most drawn to often carry our shadow for us. They express what we repress. They live out what we've locked away. And because we do not recognize those qualities as our own, we admire or resent them in others. That's why some people spark obsession. They awaken a part of you that's been sleeping but not dead. They don't just attract you, they activate you. And the emotional chaos that follows is the unconscious trying to reintegrate a lost piece of the self. This is not about blame or shame. It's about becoming whole. Jung believed that healing does not come from cutting away the parts of you that don't fit. It comes from acknowledging everything that lives inside you, including what you've tried to forget. And sometimes love is the mirror that forces you to look. That's why we fall so hard, and why we break even harder, because in that mirror we don't just see them, we see the version of ourselves we've abandoned. Have you ever loved someone for their boldness, their confidence, their intensity, and later realized it terrified you, that they lived out a part of you you never allowed yourself to touch? That's not just chemistry, that's psychological projection. You didn't fall in love with them, you fell in love with your shadow, dancing in someone else's skin. And as long as that part of you stays unconscious, you will keep needing other people to carry it for you. But the real work of love is reclamation. To see the trait in them and say, that too is mine. Their wildness, their emotional depth, their freedom, their anger, it's not just theirs. It's a part of you calling out for integration. And once you stop outsourcing your wholeness, something incredible happens. You stop chasing those who trigger you. You begin embracing the qualities you once feared. And in that inner union, the need to repeat begins to dissolve. This is how we begin to love differently. Not from lack, not from longing, but from wholeness. From the quiet strength of a self that no longer hides from itself. And when you meet someone from this place, not because you need them, but because you see them, love becomes something new, not a repetition of the past, but a creation of something truly alive. Deep within each of us live ancient patterns, archetypes, that Jung believed shape the very foundation of our inner lives. They are more than just roles or personalities. They are emotional blueprints passed down through the collective unconscious, guiding our choices without our awareness. And when it comes to love, these archetypes don't just influence who we're attracted to, they dictate the very story we're trying to live out. Until we see them, we don't choose our partners, they choose us, through the hidden desires we don't yet understand. You may think you're seeking kindness, stability, or passion, but often, what you're really seeking is a specific energy that matches an unconscious narrative. You may be drawn to someone who embodies the wounded child because you unconsciously want to rescue them, or someone who acts as the critical parent because a part of you still craves approval from an authority figure that once withheld love. These aren't conscious decisions, they are energetic contracts signed by the soul long before you knew what you were doing. The Anima and Animus, two of Jung's most powerful archetypes, represent the unconscious feminine within men and the unconscious masculine within women. They form the internal image of the ideal partner, crafted not just by personal experience, but by collective symbolism and early emotional impressions. When you meet someone who resembles that inner image, it feels like destiny, like recognition. But what you're recognizing isn't them. It's the reflection of a figure that has lived inside you for years. This is why some people feel like soulmates the moment you meet them. Not because you share a divine connection, but because your psyche sees in them a match for your inner pattern. The feeling is real, the pull is powerful, but it is not always love. Often, it is projection in its most intoxicating form. You're not falling in love, you're falling into a myth, a sacred image made flesh. And while that experience can be transformative, it can also be blinding. As long as these archetypes remain unconscious, they will continue to shape your love life without your consent. You'll chase the same highs, fear the same vulnerabilities, repeat the same betrayals, not because you are doomed, but because your inner story is still running the show. But when you bring these inner images into the light, when you see them for what they are, everything begins to shift. You start asking, does this person love me, or do they just fit my fantasy? And in that moment of awareness, you create space. Space to love differently, to step out of the myth and into the truth, to see the person in front of you not as a projection, but as a soul, no longer burdened by your longing, no longer required to carry your image, just seen as they are. And from that seeing, real love can finally begin. The most painful love stories are not accidents, they are awakenings. When someone enters your life and fits the pattern perfectly, you feel alive, seen, stirred. But when that love begins to unravel, when the very person who once felt like home becomes the source of your deepest hurt, that's when the pattern starts to break, not quietly, but violently. Jung believed this collapse is not just heartbreak, it is a crisis of meaning, a sacred rupture in the unconscious that forces us to wake up. You may feel like you've lost something irreplaceable, but what's truly being lost is the illusion. The role you didn't know you were playing, the fantasy you didn't know you projected. And while that loss can feel like death, it is actually the beginning of rebirth. The soul uses relationships to show us our most hidden truth. And when love hurts the most, it's usually because we've come face to face with a part of ourselves we've long avoided. This is where many people get stuck. They try to go back to fix it, to restore what was, to re-enter the dream. But once the projection shatters, it cannot be unbroken. You've seen too much, you've felt too deeply. You now know that the love wasn't just about them, it was about you, about your longing, your need, your shadow, your myth. And this realization, while devastating, is also the key to your freedom. Jung called this moment individuation, the process by which the self begins to emerge from the roles it has outgrown. It doesn't happen in comfort, it happens in the fire, when you are forced to look inward instead of outward, when you ask not, why did they leave me, but why did I need them to stay? It's not an easy question, but it's the only one that leads you home. The truth is, most people are not ready to love consciously. They want the high, the fantasy, the validation, but not the work, not the confrontation with the self. That's why so many relationships burn fast and die hard, because the real purpose of the connection was not longevity, it was transformation. Some people don't stay because their role was to awaken you, not walk with you. And when their part is done, the soul releases them, even if your heart still holds on. But when you honor the pain as a portal, everything begins to shift. You stop asking, why me? And begin asking, what now? You let the love become your teacher, not your tormentor. And you walk forward, not the same as before, but wiser, quieter, more whole, because you no longer chase the pattern. You've seen it, you've lived it, and now you are free to choose something new. The cycle only ends when you can name it. That's what Jung meant when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You're not cursed, you're not unlovable, you're simply unconscious of the forces that have been choosing for you, and the moment you shine light on those forces, the spell begins to break. What once felt inevitable now becomes optional. What once felt like love now reveals itself as a pattern, and with that, your power returns. True love, real, conscious love, can only exist where projection ends, where you are no longer casting your wounds onto another, and they are no longer wearing your unmet needs like a mask. This kind of love doesn't begin in fantasy, it begins in clarity, in two people who have done the work to see themselves and no longer need the other to fill a void. They come together not out of fear, but out of resonance, not to complete each other, but to walk beside each other whole. This doesn't mean love becomes easy, but it becomes true, it becomes grounded. You stop needing constant reassurance, because you're no longer chasing ghosts. You stop fearing abandonment, because you've stopped abandoning yourself. And the attraction, it no longer comes from the chaos of your unconscious, but from the calm of your presence. You're no longer magnetized by trauma, you're drawn to peace. Some people may no longer interest you. The drama may lose its taste. The games may bore you. That's not loneliness, that's evolution. You're no longer looking for someone to mirror your suffering. You're looking for someone who meets you in your healing. This shift is quiet, it's not flashy, but it is sacred. Because for the first time you're not falling into love. You're choosing it with eyes wide open. You may still feel the pull to the past, the urge to repeat. That's normal. Healing is not perfection, it's recognition. You will still meet people who awaken old roles, but now you see them. You hear the whisper of the pattern, and with every conscious choice, you rewrite the script. You reclaim your story, and you teach your psyche. We are not who we used to be. In this space of clarity, love becomes an offering, not a transaction, a presence, not a projection. And the people you attract will begin to reflect your wholeness, not your wounds. You won't need to chase. You won't need to beg. You will simply meet two souls fully seen, finally free. The ultimate truth that Jung gently leads us toward is this: the love you're searching for has always been a mirror of your own soul, trying to come home. Every person you've ever loved, especially the ones who left you unraveling, were not just partners in romance. They were teachers of your unconscious, sent to illuminate the pieces you'd lost, suppressed, or projected onto someone else. In their embrace or in their absence, you were always being invited, not into their world, but deeper into your own. We spend so much of life reaching for connection, wanting to be seen, to be chosen, to be held. But until you see and choose yourself, Every relationship becomes a transaction of unmet need. Love cannot grow in the soil of scarcity. It grows in the space of presence. Jung's wisdom shows us that our greatest relationships begin not with someone else, but with the parts of ourselves we are finally brave enough to reclaim. You become free when you stop asking others to carry your soul's unfinished work. When you say, "That part I admired in them, it belongs to me too." When you see your shadow and choose to love it. When you look at your pattern and choose to end it, not through bitterness, but through awakening, that is when attraction changes. That is when love stops being a loop and becomes a path. A sacred road walked by two conscious beings, not two wounded children reenacting their past. You'll notice the difference. It won't feel like a rush. It will feel like a remembering, not urgent, but peaceful, not obsessive, but alive. You won't be trying to win love. You'll be meeting it. You'll recognize the quiet safety of someone who doesn't need you to rescue them or prove yourself, and you will no longer feel incomplete in their absence. Because you will have already come home to the one person who was always waiting, yourself. That's what individuation means. Not separation from love, but the transformation of it. When you become the one who holds your own heart with reverence, every relationship becomes a reflection not of your lack, but of your fullness. And whether it lasts a lifetime or a season, love no longer controls you. It expands you. It mirrors your strength. It honors your awareness, and it deepens the sacred journey of being whole. So, if you've loved and lost, loved and hurt, loved and repeated, know this: nothing was wasted. Every encounter was your soul trying to wake you up. And now you are awake, no longer chasing, no longer stuck, just here, aware, alive, ready not just to be loved, but to love without illusion, because you no longer need someone to carry your healing. You've become it.